Sachit Sukha Swarupaya Swamire Tapaharine. My pranams at the feet of respected Maharaj and Matajis. Greetings to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Ireland, and to everyone assembled here, faculties, dignitaries, students. In the third session, we have this PowerPoint on mind management. So, I don't have to tell you how important the topic is. Today we all acknowledge it. We know how important it is. May I ask all the young people gathered here to sit straight, please? Because we are going to study something in yoga psychology. And if you slouch, you can't understand yoga. So especially the young people here, please sit straight. I know the seats in JNU are too comfortable. Business class seats. So you can't understand much of yoga if you slouch. Yes. In this presentation, we are going to combine yoga psychology with Western psychology and also the modern insights of neuroscience. Because let us have a comprehensive view of what mind management is about and what techniques we can apply to better our own mind. Because our entire experience of life depends on our mind. Yes, we are all agreed on that? Yes. That we can't actually deal with anything efficiently in life if we are not in control of our mind. Isn't it true? Yes. Yes, so we are all agreed on this point. For instance, look at your perceptions just now in this hall. If you are actually tired or worn out, then this is going to appear very boring to you. If you are in a happy, receptive state of mind, this may appear interesting. If you are in a sort of jaded, confused state of mind with too many unconnected ideas, then this will also appear very unconnected. Our perceptions depend upon the nature of our mind, the state of our mind. So how important is this topic of mind management? And we will be also taking things from the Upanishads. You see, that's our foundational philosophy. And let me start, that is why, with an Upanishadic verse, mantra, which is going to give you a very good imagery of what human life is about. This is from the Kathopanishad, a 4,000-year-old philosophy, talking about mind and its management, the different faculties available to us. How do we manage them so as to better the human experience? The actual mantra goes like this. Atmanam rathinam vidhi, shariram rathamevatu, buddhim tu sarathim vidhi, mana pragrahamevacha, indriyani hayanahu vishyansteshu gocharan, atmendriya manoyuktam bhokte tyahur manishinaha. The human life is compared to a chariot ride. It's a chariot ride along the road of life. And who's the rider of the chariot? The rider of the chariot is the Atman, the spiritual core of the human personality structure. It is described as a unit of pure consciousness, functioning through the body and mind. Functioning through the body and mind. That is the Atman. He is the rider of the chariot, along the road of life to the destination of mukti or freedom. This is how it is envisioned. A beautiful imagery using the analogy of a chariot. What is the chariot then? That's the human body. The most important instrument we need in order to travel this road, in order to reach our destination. And then, the most important person on the chariot, as you can see, is the charioteer. When you're driving something, the driver is the most important person in the world. So here, this driver, this charioteer, is equated with the buddhi, the higher intellect of man, which tells us what is right and what is wrong, how to stick to what is right, what is merely pleasant, how to keep away from that, to incline towards what is good in life. The discriminative faculty, the buddhi, that is the charioteer, the most important person. And what has he in his hands? The reins. The mind are the reins, the Upanishad says. The mind is like the steering wheel. Everything depends on those reins. If they are held tight, well, we'll have a smooth ride. If they are not held tight, we can have a very jerky and bumpy ride through life. Isn't it so? And the horses are our five senses. Senses, very powerful objects. They not just supply the power, they seem to have a will of their own. And in our case, you see, the horses, the senses are turned outward. They are racing towards sense objects. In the case of this horse carriage, you see, usually if you notice a horse carriage, the horses are blinkered, isn't it? In order to ensure unidirectional movement, in order to cut off peripheral vision so that the horses remain focused to the road. But in our case, there are no blinkers unless we install a few. In our case, the senses have free rein. They are constantly moving towards sense objects, and that is constantly creating impressions in our minds. Our vrittis, our sanskars, everything is getting created by what we are exposed to. The importance of sense exposure, that is deciding how my chariot will go. And if I don't start control or management at that level, I cannot come to mind control straight away. Because you see, this is supplying the power, the information required. So, it starts with controlling the senses. And then the reins. If the reins are held tight, as I told you, yes, we will have a very comfortable ride. And all this also depends on the expertise of the charioteer. You see, if he is a responsible person, if he is alert, if he is mindful of what he is doing, where he is going, then yes, we are definitely going to have a very positive experience about chariot riding. And if he is drunk, or if he isn't even awake, then well, there is absolutely no control, and the chariot can even go off the road. It can go into a gutter. We can actually leave the road of life. So you see how much of it is tallying with our experience. Today we give the experience of driving a car in modern neuroscience, but a chariot is an even better analogy, I would say, because you see the senses actually act as if they have a will of their own. So also are the other faculties in the human mind, and unless we learn to manage them bit by bit, understand what they are about, what will lead to what, the cause and effect relationship between them, we will not be able to do justice to this study of mind management. So as I told you, the first step, it starts with controlling the horses. The mind control, initiating control of mind starts with the senses. You know, the actual idea about mind management came to my mind when some students asked for it in Mumbai. And that time I made a PowerPoint on mind control. Then when I went there, I realized they don't like the word control. Today's youngsters, so then we made it into mind management. So how you can actually work on it. As I said, the first task is keeping the senses under control. If our senses are constantly racing towards sense objects without any blinkers, what does it actually do to our minds? It creates erratic thought. Isn't it true? Our exposures create the vrittis, the modifications in our minds. When these are repeated, they become our sanskars, our tendencies. So you see, control starts at this level. That is why we have put the picture of Gandhiji's 3 monkeys. Hear not evil, speak not evil, and see not evil. You can hear what is good. Expose yourself to what is good and noble and right in life. And you see, our senses that is why what they take in, the intake, is actually called ahar in Sanskrit. It's not the food you eat, but what you take in through every sense. What we take in through the eyes, what we take in through the ears, everything is going to make the experience in my mind. It is going to create the modifications of my mind. So, ahara shuddho sattva shuddhi, Shankaracharya says, what you take in through the senses must be good, must be pure. That will decide the content of your mind. That is the importance of the senses. So, this is the very first step. The next step is to understand how much of the reins is in our hands. You see, modern Western psychology will tell you the conscious mind is only a strip on the surface of the mind. It's just the tip of the iceberg, as you can see there. And the looming into the waters is the huge subconscious, and then beyond that is the unconscious, which we practically know nothing about. So then how much of the rein is in my hands? You will say a very small part. But you know, the good news is, the small part which is peeping out of the waters, that is the inlet to the subconscious and unconscious mind. What I consciously allow to seep in, only that will go into my subconscious. That will become the content of my subconscious and unconscious. This is a very important psychological fact. So when I understand that the inlet is the conscious mind, then naturally I will understand I am in charge. I am in control. I can bring a large part of the reins into my hands. And I don't have to leave it at the mercy of my hormones or my emotions or somebody's emotions. No. A large part of the rein can be brought into our hands. This is the understanding we get from this slide. Here we need to understand some insights from neuroscience also, because the common question that crops up here is, what is the difference between brain and mind? Isn't it? How do we actually use our brain and our mind to better our life? You see, the difference is very simple. To give you a very simple example, the brain is like the hardware, the mind is the software. And the brain is something like your mobile instrument in your hands. But the mind is the actual electromagnetic radiation network all around us, which brings us the actual information, which processes the information. And when it is repeated, whatever this information in the mind is repeated, it etches neural patterns in the brain. So actually the brain is etched by the thought patterns in your mind. You are wired, the rewiring of the brain is through the mind. Our thoughts are closest to us. When we work upon our thoughts, when we repeat the thoughts we want, when we remove the thoughts we don't want, when we link the right connections, when we delink the wrong connections, you will see the neural connections in your brain also change. This is the great science of neuroplasticity. So remember, you are not pre-wired for a predestined life. At any point of time, we can recreate our neural connections. Before the 1990s, it was believed that the brain is hardwired by genetics, by circumstances, experiences of early childhood. But you know, after the 1990s, a lot of research took place in brain science, and they arrived at the conclusion that it is not so. The brain is hardwired by nothing. At any point of time, you can change your neural connections. This is what neuroplasticity is. Your brain is always plastic, always elastic, always malleable. And with enough conscious thought, the right effort put in, willful, deliberate, conscious, structured, organized thinking, you can change any neural connection at any point in your life. Because neurogenesis, the creation of neuronal cells, takes place all through your life. Not just that, the neural connectivity, the neural pathways that you make, the circuits that you create, all this can change at any point in your life. So you see, a large part of our brain and mind is our own making, obviously, and we can change it for the better at any time. Because we link, we can delink. Because we do, we can undo and again redo. We can do whatever we want. That is why you see, Vivekananda always said, you are what your thoughts have made you. So take care of what you think. Thus you become the creator of your own destiny. Not that we are predestined, not that we are actually wired for some specific experience only and not others. All these things which we have ingested in a wrong way, they have been overthrown by modern neuroscience. This is actually called the science of neurosculpting, because you sculpture your brain according to your thoughts. The bottom line is this: you rewire your brain through your mind. That is the importance between this connection. You see, the brain functions like actually a physical template of the thought patterns in my mind. If I change those thought patterns, the neuro connections as well as the neurochemistry of my mind is bound to change. This is how we actually change our whole body, we change our life. So you see, a large part of the reins is indeed in our hands. What are the factors which affect these neural pathways? This is the most important thing for us to understand. First is learning or cognitive experiences. I already mentioned this, what you are exposed to, what you pick up through the senses. That's the first step. That decides how the etching starts. Because you see, what you pick up from your exposures creates vrittis in your mind. When you repeat them, they become sanskars. So the very first factor which affects your neural pathways, the neural connections in your brain, is your cognitive experiences. What you take in, what you learn first, and then what you repeat. This is the very language used in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, you know. When you take in an experience, it creates a vritti, he says. When you repeat it, you create a sanskar. You see, neuroscience is giving you the same factors. Cognition, repetition. And the third vital factor is Conscious attention spans, only what I allow to get in will get in. What I reject will not get in. We already discussed the conscious mind is the inlet to the subconscious and the unconscious. We can't make these changes if we are only on automatic pilot, which many of us are. Recognize this fact. If we are only given to unconscious compulsive thinking, which we are not aware of, then well, neuroplasticity is not going to work for us. It will work only when we are conscious of what we are thinking. We have put a distance between ourselves and our thoughts, ourselves and our emotions. Then we get control over them. We get the ability to convert them into sanskars or to just reject them, throw them out. So conscious attention spans are vital to creating the right neural pathways. Here we will understand a very important law in neuroscience, Hebbian's law of neural connections. See, this law states, it's quite obvious, notice it, neurons that fire together wire together. Obviously, neurons that fire together in your brain are going to wire together, and neurons that fire out of sync, they fail to link. I will explain this law through an example. So many students are here. Just suppose that you have been studying for an assignment. You have an important assignment tomorrow, and you're sitting in your room with your laptop and studying, and your gaze suddenly fell out of your window, and you saw a blooming red rose there. Now the red rose blooming, and your neurons fired and connected the red with the red jacket which your football coach wears. And you are the great star of your football team, you know. So you helped hit that crucial goal which helped you win the inter-college match last year. And then the adulation and the elation and all the euphoria, you start feeling it right there. It was all sparked off by the red rose. You see the connection you have made. Red rose, red jacket, football match, and I hitting the goal, and well, the euphoria, the enchantment of the situation. So you see, this is how we connect. This is actually the law of conditioning and association. When neurons fire together, they are going to connect together. And if you don't want them to connect together, what should you do? When you see the red rose, stop there. Don't jump to the red jacket. And how will you stop there unless you are mindful of your situation? That is why conscious attention spans. Thoughts should not just be happening. Thoughts, actually, you can control your mind only when you are aware of your thoughts. In some sense, you are mindful of what is happening. Some level of awareness is there which makes me conscious of what is happening in my mind. Because you see, thought is the starting point of action. If I'm not even aware of my thought, my actions can never be trusted. This is the basic thing. So, Hebbian's law of neural connections is giving us this very important idea. Another simple example is right here in this hall. You see, why are we using this PowerPoint? So that you get to connect the idea with an image. Isn't it? So when you need the idea tomorrow, the concept may not arise easily, but the image will pop up easily. So we are trying to connect an idea to an image so that you are able to retain the concept and revive the concept whenever you need it in your mind. So we are using Hebbian's law to explain Hebbian's law here. This is the simple law of neural connections. The third point here is, if you don't use these connections, you will lose them. Our youngsters don't like repetitions. They find them very boring. But you know, what you repeat, you retain. What you don't repeat, you will lose. This is a simple part of the law of conditioning. So learn to repeat what you want to retain and learn to discard what you don't want to experience in life. This is how we consciously create our neural pathways. Our neural pathways are created by our thought patterns. Our thought patterns are under our will, under an enlightened buddhi. And so we are in charge of our life. As Swamiji said, we are the creators of our destiny. There's no doubt about it. And then here we will also dwell upon equations of suffering. You see, most of the problems have to do with human suffering. Yes. And you know what almost all of our suffering is due to? It is due to emotional insecurity. Try to understand this problem. Emotional insecurity causes most of our suffering. So we need to understand negative emotions. The cause of negative emotions is toxic thoughts. I am giving you very general statements. See in your own life what it means. Negative emotions are caused by toxic thoughts. So then what are toxic thoughts? Our culture, you see, the Indian cultural values have made things very simple. They have summarized the whole picture for us. Toxic thoughts means, Hindi में भी ये भाषा है, संस्कृत में भी है, जो षड्रिपु होते हैं, that is toxic thoughts. 6 groups of thoughts which are responsible for all our negativity. Kama, Krodha, Mada, Lobha, Moha, Matsarya. We are very familiar with this because it is part of our culture. We have always been warned about this, that these षड्रिpus, these are the 6 enemies of man. These are the 6 enemies which will only generate negativity in your mind. Kam is lust, Krodh is anger, Mada is false pride, ego, Lobh is greed, and then Moha is delusion, and finally jealousy. Matsarya is jealousy. So these are the 6 group of thoughts which are the starting points of negativity, negative emotions. And once you are into this rut of negative emotions in your mind, naturally it creates wrong complexes, wrong neural connections. You repeat them unknowingly. It results in low energy levels and finally depression. And after getting a severe blow, then we start thinking, how did this happen? So this is the first equation of suffering. Most of our suffering is negative emotions. It starts from toxic thoughts. So again, control should start at this level, not at the level of treatment. The second important idea which we need to understand suffering is, we have ingested a number of false facts which have been overthrown today, but it's difficult to remove it from our minds. The first is that your brain is hardwired by genetics and circumstances. You know what this means? Suppose somebody has had a traumatic or abusive experience in childhood. Well, you're done for life. You can't do anything more. It can never be, because your neural connections, even your neural cells, the neural cells keep getting created any point of your life. Not that you are restricted to whatever you have passed through. Not that your neural connections cannot be changed. And you are definitely not hardwired by genetics. So this is the first false fact. The second is that any addiction or OCD is irreversible. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. So if we give this message to our students that, well, once you get addicted, you're gone. The fact is, it is not so. You see, a few years back, the common addictions were at the most drug addiction and substance abuse. Today we have hundreds of types of addictions. Because of tremendous multimedia exposure that we get, you have internet addictions, addictions to instant gratification techniques. So all this, if we are going to give out the message that they are irreversible, it is actually removing the energy and the cheer from our youth force. Any addiction is reversible because of the simple fact that your neural connections are made by conscious thinking processes. Conscious thought can check and change any neural connection. So you are not hardwired for anything, and you are not going to be a lifelong addict of anything. You can change whenever you feel like, when you will sufficiently strongly, when you put in the right kind of effort for a long time, anything can be reversed. This is the second idea we should know. The third and most important idea is how to stop thinking the way you feel. One important fact about neurochemistry is, you know, when you think a thought or feel an emotion, a corresponding chemical is released into your bloodstream. And as long as that chemical persists, you're going to think and feel in the same way again and again. So, that is the reason why we can't stop thinking the way we are feeling. Now here you need to understand this equation in order to overcome that effect. Suffering is pain times the resistance. Suffering is equal to pain into resistance. Let me give you an example here. Suppose somebody throws a bad word at you. Somebody calls us a fool. Now it's a small outpouring of somebody's bad mood, the word fool. But what did I add to it? I added my anger. I added all my negative emotion, my ego, my pride, maybe my jealousy, whatever. I added all this, and so my suffering becomes pain into all this. Pain times my resistance. But if I had a clean mind, my resistance, if it was zero, my suffering will be zero even if the pain is there. The pain of a small word can be borne very well. If I add my resistance to it, it becomes an enormous suffering for me, which will go on lifelong. But if I remove my resistance, which means I am able to manufacture a clean mind bereft of toxic thoughts, bereft of negative emotions, my resistance is going to be 0, my suffering will be 0 even if a little pain persists. So this is the way we can overcome the way we feel, overcome the connection between our thoughts and feelings. The third is, the next one is self-directed neuroplasticity. You see, all this is to be done by oneself. That is the meaning of self-directed neuroplasticity. You are at the head of change and nothing else, not any conditioning process or method. Your will, your effort is at the head of all change in this process. You see, you can reinforce neural pathways, you can delink negative pathways, you can pattern your circuits as you wish, and the heart of it all is the art of creating sanskars. And this is where yoga psychology has an enormous contribution to make to all of us. हम ये बोलते ही रहते हैं कि अच्छे संस्कार चाहिए, लेकिन इसको create कैसे करना है? With the kinds of exposures we are giving our young people, what can you expect? How will you create the right kind of sanskars? Here we need to know a very important point from yoga psychology. You see, we already discussed this point. Paying conscious attention is the single determining factor in changing neural pathways. Now just focus on this diagram. It's a very important idea which comes in the commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, but it is vital to our today's youth understanding how exactly their thoughts are functioning in their own mind and what the result is. You see, when thoughts arise in the conscious mind, either due to your exposures or due to your memories, what happens? It creates vrittis, modifications in the conscious mind. Right? Our thoughts create modifications in our conscious mind, and then we repeat them. So they go into the subconscious, they become our tendencies. Tendencies in Sanskrit are called sanskars. And then they don't just stay there in the subconscious mind. They further sprout into conscious thoughts from time to time. Isn't it so? Many of our thoughts are memories. They are coming from our sanskars. They keep sprouting into thoughts. So you notice when they sprout into thoughts again, we call them memories. So memory is nothing but recycled conscious thought. Memory is nothing but recycled conscious thinking. So when you recycle conscious thought, you are again repeating the thought, the cycle continues. Your vrittis are becoming your sanskars are becoming your smriti. You get the idea? Your thoughts are becoming your tendencies are becoming your memories, and the cycle continues. So how do I break this cycle? I am in charge of my conscious mind. So if I change the vrittis there, the modifications of my mind there, only the right stuff will become part of my subconscious content. So I decide my sanskars. When I decide my sanskars, I naturally decide my memories. My memories are going to be good. So my experience of life will be much better. I will have a much more comfortable, enjoyable chariot ride through life. It won't be a bumpy ride. But if I'm not controlled at that end, if the vrittis themselves are not in my hands, then my sanskars will not be in my charge, nor will my memories be. So the recyclation of thought in our own mind, it's so important to understand this, because when you change your thoughts, you change your mind. When you change your mind, accordingly you etch your brain. So you see this whole cycle, you find it in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Very important for our young people to understand how important is conscious right thinking. And if we keep encouraging negative thought patterns in our mind, we are truly done for. That is the greatest enemy we can have. There is no enemy outside of us. Our own thoughts can turn against us. And that is why the Bhagavad Gita says, you are your greatest friend or your greatest enemy. A very powerful idea. It's all inbuilt in ourselves. Fortunately for us, there are words for all this in our culture. You see, you have come across all this. Importance of conscious thinking, effort and work in self-directed neuroplasticity. We call it Vivek. Install a filter in your mind which will allow only the right things to get in. What we discussed in Ahar. You see, Vivek is discrimination. Nishtha is sticking to what is right. Even if something appears very pleasant, I know I have to incline towards what is right. What is good for me, what is good for others. Third is right karma, right action. That is the most important part. You know what karma does? Action reinforces sanskars beyond everything. The right action will reinforce my sanskars naturally. And so this is actually neuroplasticity being made practical. And sadbhav. Sadbhav is always projecting only the right good type of emotions, positive emotions towards others. And Sanyam is, of course, purity of life. Patterning circuits. We have words even for this in our culture. Your thoughts and your energies will tend to flow through those grooves. So you see what a gain it is. When we were in school, it was part of our educational scheme to every day write down what you are doing for others. You see how they were helping us pattern our circuits. When you actually do the thing, you are actually patterning your brain. And that is the way to overcome life's problems. You will not face those toxins, the toxic thoughts, if my circuits are patterned rightly. That is why you see, we have all these mottos, Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara. This is straight from the Upanishads. It's an Upanishadic mantra. Inclined towards Dharma, inclined towards Satya. And naturally you will be patterning the right types of circuits and you will be coming out of all negativity. Here it is important for us to understand one important equation, which again comes in the Yoga Sutras. You see, mind is considered to be nothing but thoughts playing on consciousness. Isn't it true? Isn't it our experience? Watch your mind just now, thoughts flitting on a background of awareness. Isn't this true? So this is the mind, thoughts playing on consciousness. So then, what should consciousness be? It's a simple mathematical equation. It should be mind minus thoughts. This is yoga. Yogastu chitta vritti nirodh means mind minus thoughts. If I can generate the state of mind minus thoughts, removing thoughts from my mind, I've reached the state of yoga, the state of pure awareness, or what we call consciousness. So something of this, at least momentarily getting a glimpse of this state, is required for us to understand the rest. All this self-directed neuroplasticity, putting a distance between me and my thoughts, being able to manipulate my emotions, being able to remain in control. All this can easily be attained by yoga if I learn this simple equation and if I learn to retain this state of awareness and not get just swept away by my thoughts and emotions all the time. This is the difference between Freud and Patanjali. You see, this is a very important point for us to know. For decades we have been believing in Freudian psychology. You see, the difference is here. Freud said that emotions arise from the unconscious. And the unconscious is a dark, inaccessible hole which I know nothing about. So then I can't do anything about my emotions. So then you are at the mercy of your emotion. You have to labor under whatever you are exposed to, whatever you feel like at any given moment. You can't bring about any change. So this was part of Freudian psychology. But you know, it is totally overthrown in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras because, and this is such an ancient text, 2,500 years ago. And there it is stated that your emotion, it doesn't directly deal with emotion, it deals with thoughts. It is stated that if you tag your thoughts to a high ideal in life, you transform your emotions. Ishvara Pranidhanatvat is a sutra given by Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which means dedicate your thoughts to a higher ideal in life and you will see you won't get into negative thought patterns at all. That is the way to elevate, to ennoble emotion. And don't think that emotions cannot be transformed. It is not that we are at the mercy of our emotions. Our emotions, especially negative emotion patterns, they depend on toxic thoughts. If you remove that portion, the emotion will collapse. It will get rejected from your mind. But it has to be consciously done. Through directed conscious thinking, you can change any emotion. And so, what is the actual pattern given by the Yoga Sutras is, when in negativity, practice positive thought currents. No matter what is thrown at you by the world, your reaction should always be positive. If I can control my own mind, I can control any situation in the world. And if my mind is not under control, even if the whole world is doing well, I will not allow it to do well. The world will go on perfectly well without us, isn't it? But then why do we feel I should be doing something? Because we can't keep still. When you can't still yourself, you actually kill yourself. These are all means to bring the mind under control. You see, the very first method he gives is Maitri, be a friend to all. Positive reaction on your part. Be kind to those in misery. Positive reaction on your part. Be joyful with those who are happy. Positive reaction on your part. Be indifferent to the wicked. Again, positive reaction on your part. Don't react according to what is thrown at you. Then you will be at the mercy of that emotion. So if I can control my own mind, I control every mind in the world. To the extent I control my own mind, I can control others. To the extent I make a difference in myself, I make a difference in the world. This is the simple equation. We should not think that this is a very selfish way of looking at it. Not at all. When we actually transform our mind, we touch the core, the source of the mind, which is awareness, which is the same in all. So I naturally touch everyone in a very deep way. This is the only way to bring about transformation. So change your mind and you can change the world. Our culture is such a masterly culture. It helps us do this naturally, collectively. You know, culture is the art of collectively creating positive neural pathways, delinking wrong memory and impulses, and consciously producing sattvic states of mind. It's a culture of very high emotional and spiritual intelligence. Let me give you a simple story here. A real story which happened a few years back. There was this American girl who was a connoisseur of Western art, and she was a dancer actually. She had learnt Western dance. For some reason, due to various factors, she went into a period of depression. And so she wanted to travel and get out of her spells of depression. She took a lot of medication and nothing worked. And then she came to India. She had friends in India. And one day, by chance, she saw a Bharatnatyam performance. She stayed for about 6 months in India, one glance at this performance, and she wanted to learn Bharatnatyam, and she started learning. She found that in a few weeks, she came out of her spells of depression. She came out of it completely. And then she went and asked her teacher that how is it that Bharatnatyam brings me out of depression? How does it bring cheer into my mind? And the teacher told her, tell me, what are you depicting in Bharatnatyam? You are depicting the moods of gods. You are depicting the bhava of either Shiva or Shakti or Krishna or Ganesha, the emotions, the divine moods of gods and goddesses. So when you depict or portray such a high elevating mood, your own mind gets imbued with that emotion. You divinize yourself. So how can your mind not be cheerful? This is the classic stance of Indian cultural art forms. They are meant to elevate human life. That which does not elevate human life cannot be called culture. The very purpose of culture is elevation and divinization of human life, raising man to his true level as being a real mirror of God. So this is the glory of our cultural values. Our young people especially should feel proud of what we have in our heritage. Let me go into this a bit because this is important to understand in mind management. You see, when we are talking of happiness, which is everybody striving, today's positive psychology has come to the theory of PERMA. This is the most current theory in positive psychology, that there are 5 factors responsible for human happiness. Now notice these 5 factors. PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, is pleasure plus engagement plus relationships plus meaning plus achievement. According to positive psychology, these are the 5 factors responsible for human happiness. Now observe them closely. You can see they are object-based. For pleasure, you need an object of pleasure. For relationship, you need an object. For engagement, you need an object. So then is happiness just the collection of accumulation of choice objects? Is this what it comes to? We must think originally for ourselves. And our culture, our psychology tells us, no, happiness is not dependent on objects. So now let us see, is there any validity in this claim? You know, when they were in the 1990s, when they were brain mapping, you know brain mapping? Finding the specific areas of the brain which are responsible for specific functions. So they were brain mapping the area for happiness, also to map the brains of monks in meditation. Because they wanted to know that is there a happiness which is not based on objects. So they invited a number of monks and men who were given to long periods of meditation every day. So they were asked to meditate, and then all the electrodes were fixed and fMRI scans were taken. And you know what they found? Something very amazing. As soon as the thought of compassion or loving kindness was introduced into this monk's mind, his whole prefrontal cortex, that is the frontal lobe of the PFC, prefrontal cortex, lit up. It ignited just one noble thought. And look at the neural connections he has made through his meditative habits. The whole thing lit up so as to say that the greatest happiness is upon him. And the doctors were forced to conclude that he must be the happiest guy in the world. And he's a penniless monk. He's a monk without possessions. So you see, where does happiness lie then? It cannot be the accumulation of choice objects. It is inherent in us. This is what our basic philosophy says. Our mind is so perverse, so used to negative thought patterns, it doesn't allow the inner joy to come out. This is the whole problem. That is why the recommendation given in our scriptures, in the Bhagavad Gita, everywhere is, get used to a sattvic way of life. The sattva mode ensures your happiness without objects. If you are at the mercy of objects, today the object is there, you are happy. Tomorrow it will move and your happiness also will move. So do we want that kind of a happiness, which is dependent on something else? No. And that is not our real nature even. Happiness is inbuilt. If I allow it to manifest, it will manifest. If I generate the right mental mode, the sattvic state, it will come out by itself. You see the characteristics of sattva: vitality, serenity, greater awareness. All these are elements in this happiness. And the sattvic state of mind can be brought about by these simple ethical disciplines again: straightforwardness, purity, control, intelligent one-pointedness. Generating the sattvic state of mind is preliminary to any higher development. Without a sattvic state of mind, it is not possible. No matter what mind management techniques we know, if we are not used to this state of mind, we will not know true happiness. So this much we should understand from this, that happiness is a state of mind, not dependent on an object. So it cannot be an object-based conditional space. A state is not an object-based conditional space. It is independent of content. It cannot be generated by the influx of objects, but by the unfolding of higher awareness from within. This is happiness. It is a state of mind which we can generate. Next, let us come to this vital connection in mind management is between our energy centers and thought patterns. You see, this is usually waived in mind management techniques, but this is a very important technique, deeply stressed in our scriptural literature. Just now we discussed that the brain is, as it were, the instrument of the mind, but you know, the entire central nervous system is the instrument of the mind. And along this central nervous system, the body itself, are located certain centers where energy can be concentrated. You might have heard of it. They are commonly called chakras, but it has become an abusive word because so many other ideas are associated with it. The idea is there are junction points in our central nervous system where energy can be concentrated. And depending on where energy is concentrated, our thought patterns get cut automatically, depending on where we keep our energies. So कहने का मतलब यही है कि हमारी प्राण शक्ति और मन की चिंता भावनाओं में गंभीर संपर्क होता है. मनुष्य के शरीर में जहाँ प्राण शक्ति केंद्रीभूत की जाए, उसी के अनुसार मन की भावनाएं आकार लेती हैं. इसीलिए तो मनुष्य एकमात्र ऐसा प्राणी है जो खड़ा चलता है, जिसका मेरुदंड सीधा होता है, जिससे उसकी ऊर्जा शक्ति ऊपर की तरफ बह सके. This is the uniqueness of the human experience. Check and see. Any other animal does not have such a posture, so that we can retain control over our energies. And इसीलिए जीवन का पहला सबक हो जाता है शरीर और मन की पवित्रता. The incomparable value of purity in personal life. It ensures control over your own energies. That ensures control over your thoughts. If the energy is totally discursive, distracted, disturbed all the time, with no technique can you control your thoughts. This is the simple equation between our energy patterns and thought. Energy and thought patterns. And all this, EQ, emotional quotient, balance, heightened awareness, intelligence, everything depends on this. That is why you see we say in our scriptural literature that Pranmaya Kosh and Manomaya Kosh are very close to each other. They are neighbors. They affect each other. So the importance of this is part of spiritual intelligence. So this sums up the glory of your spiritual culture. The Vedanta always told us that you are not the body, not the mind. They are your instruments. You function through them. This is what is called the third person perspective. I am different from them, so I can control them. What does this perspective practically give you? It gives you higher and wider understanding of life. It helps you review your life. It helps you decide between right and wrong, make the right kind of decisions, and it helps you heal and change. Think and see, if we wear our thoughts, if we wear our emotions, you can't control them. Because we are not that. They are something you can see. They are objective realities in front of you. You can study your own mind. Taking the third person perspective brings us this ability to make all these vast changes. And when we make these changes in ourselves, we actually direct the course of collective development. Tell me which is the most important human resource available to us? It's human resource. Which is the most important capital available to us? It's social capital. When you combine the two, an effective, developed, disciplined human resource with social capital, that generates wealth. And through that, civilization develops. But then the civilization, all societies everywhere face this challenge, whether to swing towards values or to swing away from values. Just like how at the individual level we face this challenge, every society faces this challenge. And if it seeks to move away from values, it collapses. There's a big book called Collapse, How Societies Choose to Live or Die. It's all due to moving away from values. When it swings towards values, value orientation comes, spiritual perspective comes, further creative effort and human resource development comes. So you see, managing your own mind, you actually guide the course of collective development. The best contribution we can do to the world then is to learn to develop ourselves truly, manage our own minds. And that is why Vivekananda tells you, stand up, be bold, be strong, take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders and know that you are the creator of your own destiny. All the strength and succor you want is within yourself. Therefore, make your own future. Manage your mind, you will make your own future. If we ignore this, well, we actually ignore Swamiji at our own peril, because this is basic to human development. If I cannot manage the mind, I cannot effectively manage anything in life. In my life or in anybody's life, this is the only way. Thank you.